Showtime! Welcome to the show. I'm Brent Holland, and welcome one and all to Night Fright. Settle in, folks. Get the coffee going, get the tea going, get the juice going, or whatever kind of beverage you want to drink tonight. We got a show for you tonight. UFOs, specifically the top 10 UFO sightings of all time. And our guest tonight is a Canadian, which I'm really excited about. He's a filmmaker from Nova Scotia. His name's Paul Kimball. So tonight, folks, top 10 sightings. Maybe you've got top 10 of your own. And I think you're going to notice some missing and perhaps some you didn't even know about. It's going to be a wild one. Strap in and hang on. Here we go.
There is a time to question. There is a time for answers. There is a time to challenge. There is a time to speculate. There is a time for change. There is a time for truth. The time is now. Welcome to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Welcome, one and all. Welcome to Night Fright. I'm your host, Brent Holland. Tonight, folks, UFOs, the top 10 sightings. In a film called Best Evidence, Top 10 UFO Cases, Canadian director-producer Paul Kimball is a man who knows UFOlogy. While he may not be a favorite with many notables in the UFO research community, and we're going to talk about that. Who doesn't like Paul? Come on, he's a great guy. Due to his tendency to state what he thinks of various theories, cases, and personalities quite openly, he does know the history behind the topic very well and brings a natural skepticism as well without being a debunking zealot. Indeed, one could hardly think of a better person to produce a definitive documentary about the best UFO sightings to this point, and I would like to welcome you to the show for the very first time, and definitely not the last. Paul, how you doing?
Good, thanks, Brent. There are people who don't like me? It
can't be true.
Yeah, this is shocking news to me. I don't know how I can go on.
I think I know the reason, though. I think it's because you're a Red Sox fan. We're going to move along right now. Just teasing. You're in Nova Scotia. You're in Nova Scotia. There you go. How are things in Nova?
My brother's a Yankees fan. It was one or the other. So.
Yeah, I'm not very popular around these points because I'm a Yankees fan too. I was a diehard Expos fan, but that's a whole other show, folks. Let's go back to UFOs. Now, I was pretty surprised when I was looking at the list. First of all, it's a fabulous video. It's a fabulous film.
Thank you.
Nice job. But I was extremely surprised at the ones that were included and ones that were missing. And we'll get to that, but let's start off with one right away. One that I was aware of, and it came in as number 10. We're going to go in. All of a sudden, I feel like David Letterman doing a top 10 list. I have this urge to look over and go, and now Paul Schaefer or something. I don't know, whatever. Nuremberg, 1561. What took place there for the audience that may not be aware of what happened?
Well, it's important to note, first of all, that the cases, I only have one vote. I polled a large group of UFO researchers, everyone from Kevin Randall, Stan Friedman, Dick Hall, a large group, and had them rank their sort of top 10, or as Dick Hall said, 10 of the best. And then I assigned point values, averaged them all out. It wasn't exactly scientific, but I think it's probably about as close as anyone could get to a scientific poll of what the leading researchers thought the cases were.
Granted.
There were 10 that were picked. I kept the first 9, and I bumped out the 10th case. I made an editorial decision, and I put this case, the one you just mentioned, the Nuremberg case from 1561 in, because while nobody voted for it, but I wanted to make a point, which was that the UFO phenomenon, whatever it is, predates the modern sort of post-Kenneth Arnold era of 1947 onwards. And a recent book by Jacques Vallée and Chris Aubeck makes this point, Wonders in the Sky makes this point, that you can go back throughout human history, whether or not they were aliens from Zeta Reticuli or whatever you think the explanations were. Ezekiel's wheel in the Bible, Constantine at the Battle of Milvian Bridge in the Roman Empire, the 1561 case in Nuremberg, where residents of Nuremberg reported seeing what can only be described as an aerial battle taking place over the city. Now, could it have been a natural phenomenon 400 years later, 450 years now, I guess, later? Sure. We'll never know, because the descriptions from the time, there was a wood carving done of it about a year or two later, I think, that kind of depicted it as sort of like, it almost looks like spaceships in the sky kind of thing. And there was another one in Basel, Switzerland, happening around the same time. We'll never really know what these cases were. If we can't figure out what modern cases are, we're definitely not going to be able to figure out what happened 400 years ago or what happened to Constantine 1800 years ago. But the point was that this kind of stuff has been going on. This is nothing new. This is not, if you do believe in the extraterrestrial hypothesis, if you think it's aliens, it's not like they just showed up. If you think it's another explanation, it's not like they just showed up. You can look at these patterns that are happening throughout human history. Jacques Vallée was one of the early researchers who drew these kinds of links to what we would have considered myths or folklore, but also now UFO cases. I think they can safely be classed as UFO cases too, which does not mean, having just mentioned the extraterrestrial hypothesis, that I think that there were aliens flying over Switzerland in 1561. There might have been. But leaving aside the question of explanations, which the film does, just saying there is something here worthy of study, there's something here worthy of thinking about. And I wanted to make the point with the 10th case, this Nuremberg case, that this has been going on for a very long time.
Folks, we're speaking with Paul Kimball right now. He's all the way from Halifax, right? You're in Halifax?
I am indeed. Halifax.
You are Halifax, Nova Scotia. Nouvelle Écosse. We were just prior to the show, folks. We were teasing. I was speaking a little bit of French to him, and he was responding. Was that voulez-vous? How did that go again? No, never mind. Anyways, folks, Paul Kimball, of course, a filmmaker. His company is called, and I have it right here, Red Star Films, is a film and television production company located in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He founded it in 1999. Red Star has produced a wide variety of film. We're going to get to some of these too, folks. It's not just going to be UFOs tonight. And television programming, including the television series The Classical Now, Ghost Cases, the documentaries Best Evidence, Top 10 UFO Sightings, which we're discussing right now, 7 Days, 7 Nights, Stanton Friedman is Real, and, you know, fans of this show will remember Stanton's been on the show, and hopefully, again, I tried to get him on several weeks ago, but he was out of town, so hopefully we're going to book him in the new year, he'll be on. And he's got a new feature film, and he's got a feature film called Eternal Kiss, which is about vampires. Easy way to get his coordinates. Yeah, don't be scared.
Yeah.
It's only television, folks, or radio if you're listening on the 401. He's off that gas pedal, eh? Easy way to get his coordinates, and you can buy products on his website. Just go to www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on the picture associated with tonight's guest. That'll take you right to his website, and you can order the films online. I was on his website today. There's a lot of information there, folks, for all kinds of things. Terrifically put together. Let's go back now to one of the things I wanted to talk about that you made a great segue to. You were talking about biblical sightings. Michel Deschamps was on the show, and fans again of this show will know. He's the MUFON director for Ontario. He was saying that he believes that the Jonah story in the Bible, instead of going into a whale, perhaps that was a submarine, and I wanted to use that as a segue. Could be, who knows? Ezekiel saw a wheel in the sky. Shag Harbor. A lot of people don't realize Canada had its own Roswell. I was wondering if we can discuss that a little bit.
Sure, although not being a big fan of the Roswell case, I'd prefer to say that New Mexico has its own Shag Harbor. So,
Fair enough. There it is, folks.
The short is in 1967 in Shag Harbor, which is a very small community. It's not even a community, really. It's near Shelburne, Nova Scotia, which is a small town on the south shore, about 3 hours away from Halifax. And residents of the town saw lights bouncing around over the town. It was witnessed as well by, and I'm trying to get my details straight, it's been a couple of years since I've really looked into this, by RCMP officers too. What they saw was something that sort of hovered over the town and then dove down into the water in the harbor off of Shelburne, which is near Shag Harbor. It's pretty close. It sort of sat on the water. There was a yellow glow, as I recall, a looking foam that came out of it, and then it disappeared under the water. It went down. That's the story. That part of the story is confirmed. There's no question that happened. There is another part of the story that if you talk to researchers, Don Ledger and Chris Stiles, who wrote the book Dark Object about the case, that sort of maybe has been confirmed, maybe not has been confirmed, but the witnesses are anonymous and that sort of thing. Where the military came in, at Shag Harbor, which near Sandy Point, there was an American listening station. I believe it was a listening station. It was a Canadian Forces station that was leased out to the Americans, where they had listening posts, makes sense, on the east coast of Canada for the North Atlantic, for Soviet submarines. This was at the height of the Cold War in 1967.
Precisely.
So if I can draw, I'm looking at my own reflection in the thing. I'm going to draw a map here. So if it went down here, over here, then it kind of traveled a little bit up the coast of Nova Scotia to Sandy Point, which is about, 20 miles away from Shelburne. So from Shag Harbor past Shelburne to Sandy Point. And it allegedly sat off the coast there underwater while American and Canadian naval ships sort of monitored it above. Then it was joined sometime later by a second object, so the story goes, under the water. They left, went down, to underwater to the Gulf of Maine, which, using my map here, the map's gone, folks. I've completely lost the map, but it's somewhere over there. Basically off the coast of the state of Maine. And then they left. They flew up out of the water. Now, everything that I've just said from the point of the RCMP witnesses and the town witnesses saw it go into the water, float, and then disappear, everything after that is in the realm of maybe yes, maybe no, because the witnesses are anonymous. There's no question that the Navy investigated it. But Don and Chris, as I recall, have talked to divers who insist on remaining anonymous, who say they were part of those teams who went down, that saw the object, and or objects as they later became. So it's a very interesting case. What's not talked about all that much, but is true, is it flew over Halifax first. It's not like it just showed up over Shag Harbor down the South Shore. I have a very good friend who was young at the time. He actually remembers seeing it fly over Dartmouth and head down towards the coast. It was reported in the Chronicle Herald, the main newspaper here. It was reasonably well known at the time. And as Don Ledger points out, the really interesting thing about it, I guess, is in most cases, you will see the witnesses, if you see these 5 guys or whatever, they'll call it a UFO, and the government, the military, usually will come along and offer an explanation. There's a case in the film, for instance, the Santa Barbara Channel case in 1953, where top aircraft designer Kelly Johnson, basically the guy who designed the U-2 spy plane, and some of his, at the same time as some of his top test pilots and flight engineers were on a plane flying over Santa Barbara Channel. Kelly Johnson and his wife saw this object from their house, so we're triangulating. All this sort of is a great case. The military's explanation, because they reported it back to Lockheed, where they worked. The military's explanation after investigating it was that they saw a lenticular cloud, which, as we say in the film, if these guys who were, the top test pilots and aerodynamic engineers and flight designers of their time would mistake a lenticular cloud for a structured aircraft or an object of some sort, no reasonable or responsible military would have continued to employ these guys, and yet they continued going on for years afterwards. So in that case, you've got the witnesses saying they saw something that was clearly unidentified, that moved and behaved in a way that nothing that they knew, and they were designing and flying the top of the top planes that we had at the time, nothing they knew could do. The military gave a bogus explanation. In the Shag Harbor case, you actually have the witnesses saying we think it's their initial reaction was, we think it's a plane has crashed in the harbor. And the military reports, after all this was said and done, they classified it as a UFO. So it's very rare to actually see the military and the government refer to something as an unidentified flying object. But 44 years, I was born in 67, there you go. 44 years later, it's still it's unexplained. There's never been a satisfactory explanation. You would think that if it was a satellite crashing into the bay, or if it was a plane crash, certainly that all of this time later, somebody would have said, hey, here's what it was. For instance, with Roswell, eventually the military came out and said Project Mogul, which is the explanation that I accept. Whether you believe Project Mogul or not, eventually the military did come up with an explanation. In the case of the Shag Harbor, 44 years later, there's never been, to my knowledge certainly, and I don't think Don or Chris's or anyone else's, an explanation put forward for what happened off the coast of Nova Scotia all those years ago.
Paul, could I just get you to tell the folks what Project Mogul is? And I'm going to ask you why you're a skeptic on that one.
Well, I'm not a skeptic of Project Mogul. I do accept it as...
what I meant was Roswell.
Sure. Project Mogul, and I am not... I long ago stopped looking into Roswell and checked it and said, I'm satisfied. There are better people to explain Project Mogul than I am. But basically it was a balloon. So that part of the original story was right. But what the balloon wasn't the story. It was a giant, I believe it was a skyhook balloon. These things were huge. I mean, it's not like something you'd float off at your party. These were massive balloon arrays that would float way up into the atmosphere. But what it was carrying, Project Mogul itself, was a very secret, very top secret American detection equipment to detect Soviet nuclear blasts up in the atmosphere. Don't ask me how that worked. Don't ask me how, the technical stuff is beyond me. Mm-hmm. But if you look at it, it would be clear that the government would not want the information out that they had this kind of apparatus or equipment that could do this kind of thing. It's equally clear that whether or not Jesse Marcel Jr. or any of these other people that were stationed in Roswell at the time would not have had a security clearance for this particular project. So when you look at the explanation, it was a very long explanation. The government, the Air Force put out a very thorough response. Eventually, it took them long enough, but eventually pressure mounted from various sources, including within Congress, to sort of say, look, this was the height in the 90s. We want this settled and explained. I think it was a congressman named Stephen Schiff, the late Stephen Schiff, who was from New Mexico, who actually really kind of pushed this. And the government released the report on whatever it's called, the report on Roswell, and I accept it.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
What does Stanton say when you
other people that don't accept it? But
good segue into Stanton Friedman. What does Stanton say?
Well, he I believe he's called the people who released the report, Lieutenant Colonel Weaver, and there was a Captain McAndrew involved. Anyway, the officers, disinformation specialists, I believe, is what he calls them, which is a polite way of saying liars. I think Stan might even have called them liars at one point, but I'm not sure. So I'm not going to put words into his mouth, but definitely refers to them as disinformation specialists, all part of the ongoing, continuing cover-up, which somehow has managed to persist for how long now? 64 years and counting. 64, right? With any one of hundreds or thousands of people or tens of thousands of people now involved, alien technology being seeded out, a cosmic Watergate, all this sort of stuff. And at some point you would think that for reasonable people that story, as interesting and as fascinating as it is, would strain credibility to the breaking point that you could keep this secret for 64 years with so many people involved. That, leaving aside the Project Mogul explanation, that alone would be enough to say to me, unless you can show me a piece of a crash flying saucer, unless you can bring forward that physical evidence, the best that you can say is that it remains a mystery. But once you put the Project Mogul explanation forward, eventually the military did, I believe that it fits, then I think it's time to move on. there's one other thing that I would add.
Please.
If you believe that flying saucers, UFOs are from other planets, if these are aliens coming here, the technology that you would need to get from even the closest star system to our own is way beyond anything that we have, not beyond anything we can imagine, but definitely beyond anything we're going to be capable of anytime soon. To say I just do not accept the idea that these things are going to come here and then suddenly our 1940s era radar is going to bring them down, or that they're going to run into a swarm of bees, or whatever it is that causes them to crash repeatedly. Because in Stan's narrative, there's not just one crash near Roswell, there's two. There was another one in San Augustine, which happened at the same time. So I can only think that these aliens fly all the way here through interstellar space on these massive motherships, send a couple of excursion models down, and they're such lousy pilots that they run into each other. So they have sort of a fender bender above New Mexico. They crash, and the aliens say, you know what, we're just going to leave this stuff here. We're going to leave the dead bodies. We're going to leave the ships. Let them find them. I'm sure they won't be able to figure it out. I don't know. It's hard. You know, they always say, oh, you can't think like an alien. And I always say, well, you're thinking like an alien, why they would come here and all this stuff. So I'm going to think like an alien. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking if you've got this warlike species down here that's just killed 60 million of their own people, the last thing I'm going to do is leave advanced alien technology lying around for them to find. So I'm going to vaporize it or pick it up. What, you don't ever recover? It never crossed your mind you'd crash? Probably not, because you wouldn't. So anyway, I ramble on about Roswell, but there are just so many logical inconsistencies, even beyond Project Mogul, that if somebody was to say to me, well, I don't think it's Project Mogul, I could nod my head and say, well, okay, maybe it isn't. But it's certainly terrestrial. So maybe the government's still covering something up. My friend Nick Redfern wrote a book called Body Snatchers in the Desert, where he's convinced that what the government continues to cover up is the illegal use of human beings in experimentation based on Japanese medical experiments that took place in the Second World War. So basically committing war crimes. I don't buy that, and I've written about that and told Nick why I don't. But you know what? That makes more sense to me than aliens from Zeta Reticuli having a fender bender above the skies of New Mexico in 1947 and then not bothering to pick up their trash. That's, I take the UFO phenomenon too seriously to take Roswell seriously. I guess that's what I would say.
Fair enough. Paul Kimball, folks. Great show tonight. If you're just joining us, settle in, get that coffee going, get the tea going, just put your feet up and relax. Great show tonight. We're talking about the top 10 UFO sightings. He's got a great video out called exactly that. It's called just let me get the name here. Best Evidence, Top 10 UFO Sightings. We're also going to talk about some other films and documentaries that he's done, some on vampires. He's got some ghost cases. He actually wrote a terrific show and produced a terrific show on ghost hunting that we're going to get into a little bit of that, the problems faced by a Canadian filmmaker, documentary maker, TV host in Canada. We're going to talk about that a little bit too, and it's an uphill grind, let me tell you. But I want to ask Paul, by the way, www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on tonight's guest's picture. That'll take you right to his website where you can order some of his products. They're all available. Great website. As I said before, it's full of great information. You're going to really enjoy that. Are there any in the top 10 list that you believe?
Well, I believe all of them. And by the way, vis-a-vis the website, I would just say there's absolutely nothing there that you can order. All the films can be viewed for free. So our distributors, or in some cases ourselves, all of the films are available on YouTube and various other sources for free. You might have to sit through a commercial or two in one or two of them that the distributors put up, but they're all there for free. So nothing to sell, folks, other than just go to the website and watch whatever you want.
Oh, fair enough. I thought there was an order. I thought I saw an order thing there today, but I guess I'm mistaken.
Not unless my partners have logged on since I last logged on and decided they're going to start selling stuff. I don't believe in anything. Well, I do believe in some things, the Red Sox, obviously, and so forth.
Yeah, but we can forgive you for that.
Yeah. The cases interest me. I believe that this. I do believe. I believe, or I'm convinced, that the UFO phenomenon is a genuine mystery. That and I'm actually working on a book based on my blog where I discuss UFOs and ghosts and a bunch of other things in what I would call the paranormal world. And in the introduction, I think I say something along the lines of anybody who tells you they know the answer to these things is not being truthful. Now, they might not be deliberately lying to you, but they have convinced themselves, but they're not being truthful. Anyone who tells you they're interested and they don't know, those are the ones that you should probably listen to. It's about asking the right questions, not about telling people what the answers are, because the evidence just doesn't support a particular answer. You can look at all of the UFO cases that are in my film, or in Jerry Clark's UFO Encyclopedia, which is a wonderful resource, or Dick Hall's UFO Evidence, especially Volume 2. Those are probably the two best resources that anybody who wants to get a comprehensive view of the last 50 years of the UFO phenomenon can look at. Or take Valet and Auerbach's book, Wonders in the Sky. You can look at all those cases, you can see patterns, you can see all sorts of interesting, mysterious stuff. What you can't see is an answer. That's right. What you can't see is it's this, or it's extra dimensionals, or it's people from alternate universes or the future, or as the disbelievers would say, it's all explainable. All of these strange things, sure, we can't explain that small portion over there, 5%, 10%, whatever it is, but I'm sure we could. So we're just going to say we can explain them all. Well, that's somebody giving you an answer. And it's different than the answer that Stan Freeman would give, which is some of these cases are clearly extraterrestrial spacecraft. Well, I think Stan's wrong in the sense that I don't think you can say that and say it's been proven. I also look at somebody like the PsyCop guys, the Phil Classes of the world, the so-called skeptics, and they're not. They're disbelievers. They're the other side of the coin. And when they say, well, it can all be explained, well, they're not being truthful either. That's an answer that you can't give from the evidence. What you can do, though, is, and this is the cool part, this is why it interests me, and why those two particular groups don't interest me, because in the middle, my friend Greg Bishop has called it the excluded middle, which is kind of Nixonian. He used to speak of the silent majority, but there's this idea of the excluded middle in most things in society, where you'll hear the fringes of the Republican Party and the fringes of the Democratic Party, or whatever. In the UFO world, in the paranormal, you'll hear the ardent disbelievers and the ardent true believers. The rest of us sitting in the middle, the agnostics, go, no, that could be, maybe, aliens from Zeta Reticuli. Okay, as a theory, sure, it's workable. Time travelers, Michio Kaku and modern science, and Stephen Hawking, and even Carl Sagan. I was reading a quote by Carl Sagan, an interview he did with Nova several years ago before he died, where he took time travel very seriously. And he said, look, I think it's theoretically possible. Maybe people are coming back here. Why? Maybe UFOs are time travel. That's the wonder of it all, that there's so many possible answers that really at some point I think, and this is kind of where I've gotten, and this is, if people watch my film or read those books that I quoted, you look at it, I think the time has come to, at least for me and my friends, guys like Nick Redfern and Greg Bishop, the late Mac, we stopped looking at cases. At some point as a former lawyer, you can roll up so many witnesses and so much evidence and say, you know what, I think I've proven my point. There's something here. Now I'm going to start talking about what I think it might be, and the key word there is might.
Is this your inspiration, Paul, for doing the work that you do? Is it chasing down that mystery in hope of an answer?
I think that I will probably, assuming I live to be the average age for a male now of 81 or 82 in this country, I've got about 38 years left. Odds are I'm not going to make it, but I'm just going to assume that I will. So I believe that when I die, I will not have the answer. I might have the answer like half a second after I die, but that different answer. I think really it's the process of going along. I think part of what I'm talking about in this book, and it's fun, it's weird that you catch me now because I'm just writing the conclusion to the book, and which I will sell. That I will sell. No, that'll be on the website in the new year. But it's trying to figure out what the UFO phenomenon means to us. And I do believe that there is something there. I do believe this. This is a belief. I can't prove it, but this is my own personal belief. We are dealing with an advanced non-human intelligence whether it's from Zeta Reticuli, or whether it's from another dimension or another time, or whether it's from ourselves in some way. I'm not sure that I can't answer. I have my own theories and ideas, but I do believe we're dealing with an advanced non-human intelligence that is us with clues, with hints about something. And I think that something, it sounds a little new agey, which is weird for those people that know me and have listened to me for many years, that Paul's gone nuts. He's gone new agey. But the older you get and the closer to the Grim Reaper, let me tell you, you start to think about these things.
You're only 44. I'd relax a little bit about that. That's fine.
Yeah, well, I drink an awful lot of beers. That's yeah, and I eat a lot of bad food. But I don't smoke. This idea that everything from synchronicities to ghosts to UFOs, all of the paranormal are. If you're in advance, I call it the other. If the other is out there, they are giving us, or it is giving us, signs to indicate, at least to me, I kind of view it as a mountain. We kind of like to think that we're at the top of the mountain. There is a hubris to the human race. You can certainly see it in science. You can certainly see it in the disbelievers when they say, well, the aliens couldn't possibly get here, if there are aliens, because we can't get there. And if we haven't figured it out yet, then they can't. And if they have figured it out, they must be so far in advance to us that we couldn't possibly understand them. I look at the mountain, there's my mountain, and I say, we're not at the top. We haven't even hit the base camp yet. We haven't even begun. The ascent is like, we can't envision that. We're down, if you're at Mount Everest, we're down sort of getting off the plane in Kathmandu somewhere, and we haven't even gotten on the bus to the base camp yet. But at least we're in Nepal. I think that whatever it is when they use the UFO phenomenon, when they use these things, part of it is they're giving us a look at what our own future might be, of what we might be capable of someday, to inspire us, to get us on that bus to the base camp to begin the ascent. And for me, it's sort of a personal kind of thing now, to try and figure out who I am, who we are, what we're all doing here. So at some point, I don't think I'm not a religious person, but I think it's very much similar. You can look at it in the same way that anybody searching for the truth about the human condition can. And I think some of the clues can be found in the UFO phenomenon. And the way that this advanced non-human intelligence chooses to communicate with us. It's the other thing. I was at a lecture by Michio Kaku. I love Michio Kaku. In London 2 years ago. He was talking about his book, The Physics of the Impossible. I asked him a question. They had a Q&A afterwards, because I knew he had written about this. And he took my question and kind of ignored others, even though people snickered when I asked, oh, UFOs, what do you mean, aliens? But I said, look, Dr. Kaku, you've written about this galactic conversation that you think is going on. So all around us, there's this conversation going on. My question was, how soon do you think we might be able to tap into that? Well, he, on familiar ground, hey, this guy's read my book. Great, I'll answer his question. And he gave the answer that he gave in the book, which is not in our lifetimes, kid. You know, this conversation, we're like ants to their humans. Okay, fine. But I say, well, you're looking at it the wrong way, Dr. Kaku. You're looking at it, and my question was framed in this way too, but only because he had written it in this way. How do we understand them? Well, I don't think we do from that perspective. But the question is, how do they make themselves understood by us?
What was his
response? We're looking at it. Well, I didn't ask him that part because he rolled on to another question. This is something I've thought of in the 2 years since as his answer percolated. But if you look at, and one of the things I'm writing about now is this idea of art as a form of communication. You and I could sit in an art gallery and look at the same painting and see two different things. But it is a form of communication between that artist, who might be long dead, and those of us now. So in a sense, it's timeless, and it's capable of meaning different things to different people, but it's about communication. If you look at the UFO phenomenon, a number of the cases in my film, Shag Harbor is a good one. Lights in the sky, dancing around into the water, lights in the water. There's thinking of the Tehran case, so in 1976 over northern Iran, lights in the sky, breaking off, doing different things. The RB-47 where the UFO tails, send signals out, all this sort of stuff. If you go to Prague in the Czech Republic, You can see it other places too, but Prague's really the best place to see it. Blacklight theater, using light without in many cases without sound, but light and movement as a form of artistic expression. A 4th of July fireworks display. You can go to Burning Man, and you should. You can go to Burning Man and have all sorts of strange things happen to you, but they have light displays. All of these things. When I look at the UFO phenomenon, I see an attempt to communicate with us. I don't see alien spaceships flying around. I see lights. I see a form of art, a performance art, if you will. And that's, to me, that's something that's very interesting. And
that's a unique perspective, Paul. I just got to tell people who we're speaking with, they're just joining us. Folks, if you're just joining us, settle in. Lots of time left. We're only at the halfway point here. We're speaking with Paul Kimball. Paul Kimball is a terrific filmmaker out of Nova Scotia. He's written many films and produced them. One of them is we're talking about right now, Best Evidence Top 10 UFO Sightings, and yes, we will get to the number one. Ghost Cases I want to talk to him about, as well as his feature film Eternal Kiss, all about vampires. As you can see, there's a theme here that he gravitates towards, but he also does other things too. If you go to his website, www.nightfrightshow.com, just click on his picture. That'll take you right to his website. You're going to see all the other things he's involved with too. Some of them are rock videos, some of them are documentaries on music as well. So there's a lot there, folks, for you to entertain yourself with. And as he said before, all the films are there for you to watch for free. How great is that? He's also writing a book, and he's a Red Sox fan, as you can tell. Let's go back to Paul now. Now, Paul, you had mentioned the Tehran one and these dancing lights. That is a unique perspective, I think, one that I haven't heard before, that it could be a form of communication. And I have a lighting design degree. I used to work on rock shows and things like that. And without question, all art is a storytelling and, in essence, communication. And certainly that is with your music, with my music. People of the show know that I'm a composer as well. Are we missing the point, do you think? Have we missed the point with UFOs, and they're still trying to communicate with us the best way possible?
Well, and this, it's not, I appreciate the unique perspective part, but it's not. I wish I could claim that this was like, wow, it just hit me. I'd change my name to, Jesus or something and form a religion. But there's, and that's an interesting question, because he pops up in my book too in different ways. Yeah. The ultimate paranormalist, somebody who's looking for the truth about the other, whatever that is. But Greg Bishop, my friend Greg Bishop, the late Mac Tonys, and we're just the most recent group. People have been talking about this and writing about it. You know what? Even without calling it UFOs, the Bible is littered with stories about lights in the sky and things that you can interpret in a different, more modern way. We might call them UFOs. Ancient mythology, dragons, you go down the list. These kinds of signs and wonders. Sure. Yeah, these kinds of signs and wonders have been with us throughout human history. And I think they're all related. I think that the other, which is what I'll call it, changes the form of, like art. Art changes too. You can look at a Picasso or a Dali or a Jackson Pollock from the 20th century, and if you travel back, 300 or 400, well, even 100 years, less than 100 years, and look at the Impressionists from the 19th century, go back again, you can see an evolution in painting to differentiate it from different things. You can certainly see an evolution in music, how music evolves from Baroque, Renaissance, classical, Romantic period, modern music, modern classical music, but also popular music too.
Film as well.
So absolutely.
All art.
So I think it's a constant evolution. I think the evolution, if I'm an artist, and I guess I am, although there would be those who disagree, but if I am an artist...
That's okay, they're Yankee fans, don't worry about those guys.
They're probably Texas Rangers fans.
There you go.
The artist, there's a relationship between the artist and the viewer or the listener. I knew this is, anyone who's ever stood on stage and played in a band or has acted, I did the band thing, I've not acted, but you just, even actors with a camera, you just realize there's a relationship past the fourth wall with whatever's out there.
That's right.
And I think that there is that idea of a fourth wall between the UFO phenomenon, that intelligence, and us. And I think for people who want to look at it, you can break that fourth wall. You can start to speculate about what this art might be. And it's not just the lights in the sky either, Brent. I look at it, all of these things to me it's the unified field theory of the paranormal. Bigfoot may be excluded, although who knows. But synchronicities, deja vu, all of these things. I had a run of synchronicities when I was in the United States for 3 weeks in LA in the summer that I wrote about on my blog. It's going in a more enhanced version in the book, where things, one, I can sort of go, two, maybe, like over 3 weeks, 7, 8, 9, day after day. One of them happened I was on my friend Greg's radio show, and we were live in the studio, and they were happening in the studio. There was this sort of thing between me and Walter Bosley, who was the co-host, paranormal author, very good guy. And literally happening as we're doing it, related to the number 9 and some various other things. And you just go, okay, that's genuinely weird. And so it all fits into this weird world, and UFOs are part of it. And I think whatever it's trying to communicate to us is no different than what was trying to be communicated to us in the Bible or in any of the great religious texts, to sort of mystics like Henry Allen, who was a Nova Scotian evangelical in the 18th century that I've studied. All of this stuff is part of the same narrative. And I think the narrative is, again, to go back to my mountain thing, that they're trying to encourage us, to inspire us to be better. Now, it's not something that they can force us to do. You wouldn't want to force anyone to do it.
Now, you say they.
Encourage.
You say they. Do you believe in a unique, singular creator, if you will, or a creative force?
Like Einstein, I'm an agnostic. I don't believe in a personal God, that the creator, intervenes directly in our lives. I think whatever created the universe, or the universes, is beyond any of our ken. But I do believe there are advanced beings. I do believe that one of the ideas that I'm playing around with is that we're the other. That, wow, this has nothing to do with UFOs. This is so,
That's
3 years
fine.
ago.
That's what the show's about, esoteric thought. Ideas.
We, when we die, what happens when we die? Well, maybe nothing. But I do kind of, if not believe, I do kind of am interested in the idea that we can advance. And if you look at near-death experiences, people report the tunnel of light, and some go, most seem to come back, although we never really hear from the ones who go because they don't come back to tell us, so who knows. But a lot of them come back. I think there's this idea that maybe we advance through stages of existence, and the ultimate stage of existence, or at least the next one, is a collective consciousness, where you and I, if we go through, not like the Borg, but more like sort of a, what's the best? It's hard to describe, but
it's hard to describe.
The individuals blend with each other, and you become an empathic consciousness. You can feel more. You have all the knowledge of the others in a good way. I think to get to that stage, you have to have achieved, and this gets into things like reincarnation and stuff. You have to have achieved a certain level of advancement on this planet. Hitler doesn't get let in. Hitler gets sent back.
It's my vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I probably get sent back, and I think I just compared myself to Hitler. But I think I think you have to be open to going, and I think if this is the way it goes, and remember, this is me thought experimenting, but if this is true, you have to be open to going, and I think most people would be closed-minded about this idea. You have to be open about sharing and all those other things. And I think very few people go. I think most of us come back, do it again, do it again, do it again. And eventually, we'll all get there. If that's the case, then the other might be us. It might be those who have gone, providing signs to us that we need to reach a certain stage of emotional development, where we can be ready to embrace this next step in our own evolution. Or else we're going to get bounced back here to try it again and again and again. And there's a lot of people have studied reincarnation. There's a Canadian philosopher called Tom Harper. He's written a number of books about religion and philosophy, and he's rejected he looked at reincarnation and rejected it. He said, it doesn't make any sense. I paraphrase, and badly. But if you get bounced back and you can't remember it, your previous life, say you are Hitler, they go, you've been bad. We're sending you back to become better. Well, if you get bounced back and you can't remember all the horrible things you've done, where's the lesson? How do you learn? I think that you get bounced back, and then a lot of these things that we experience, that we see, deja vu, I think, the memories are there, but in an oblique way. We experience it new and again, but if we look, in certain moments, we might be able to, we see something, we hear something touches us in a certain way and improves upon us, but it's based on something that's happened before. Like I said, it's a theory that I'm working on, and I'm working my way through. It's not unique, but it does pull in and, pulling on a lot of different threads and it drives the nuts and bolts UFO guys nuts. No offense. When you start talking about things that they see as maybe being religious or spiritual or new agey, and you bring that in and say that has to be part of the UFO conversation. And by the way, we should also talk about synchronicities and maybe ghosts and maybe, yes, even Bigfoot somehow is another form of art or something that they're trying to, a form of communication. Well, they go nuts. They go, no, it just has to be aliens from Zeta Reticuli. And they're probably here collecting sperm samples and, bioengineering us to be hybrids and stuff. I don't know. Maybe they're right. But for me, that doesn't make sense. That narrative, for a lot of reasons, doesn't. But there are other narratives that might.
Paul Kimball, folks, all the way from Nova Scotia. And Paul, I understand that they let Yankee fans in, but not Boston fans. You see, I'm going to milk that joke all the way through.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it's bad news. I know. Paul Kimball, folks, www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on tonight's picture associated with tonight's guest, and that'll take you right to his website where there's a wealth of information. You bring up a lot of interesting points. This is reflected in your work, I think, without question, not only on the UFO sphere. Oh, before we run out of time, let's just finish up with that. Sure. What was number one?
The RB-47 case from 1957, which really quickly, the RB-47 was a bomber, which it was an RB-47E. They eventually changed it into fitted it out to become a top spy plane. It would fly along the Iron Curtain, spy into the U.S. spy into the USSR. Had the top-notch electronic warfare equipment, monitoring equipment, all that sort of stuff. So secret that I talked to a former crew member, Lieutenant Colonel Bruce Bailey, who's in the film, and while this part isn't in the film, but I've heard it from other sources too, that fighter command in the United States, when these planes would go out, they were so secret that sometimes when they were coming back, fighter command wouldn't know they were up there. They wouldn't be told. So they'd be scrambling fighters saying there's an unknown plane in our airspace, and it was their own guys coming back in, and they would say, look, we'd have to come in, dodge them, we couldn't. It could get a little hairy. And so these were the best of the best, these crews. Anyway, this particular plane was on a training mission over the southern United States, Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Gulf of Mexico. And when I interviewed Bailey, who went on to become, he flew in these planes for many years, highly decorated veteran, and at the height of the Cold War. And he said the guys who were in this particular plane were the best of the best. They were the guys who trained him. So these guys all, happened to be in the plane at the time, shaking it down. The pilots, there were two pilots up in the cockpit. There were other crew members, the electronic warfare guys and monitors were in the guts of the plane. They couldn't see, they just had their gear. And basically what happened is the pilots picked up a visual sighting of a light, call it an object, call it whatever you want. At the same time as the electronic equipment and everything, they picked up varying signals. Radar, all sorts of stuff. I'll call it an object for shorthand. Followed them as they came. Wait, another map. Gulf of Mexico, Louisiana, flying into Texas. There we go. There was a radar station at Duncanville, Texas, which also picked it up. So now you've got visual sighting by the air crew, their equipment picking it up, ground radar picking it up. That's already a pretty good case. They got permission to change their flight path and turn back and pursue or try and get to the object. And the object would blink in and out too. as they did that, the object flew away from them. It was, according to the testimony, it flew in a way that they couldn't duplicate. It was far in advance of anything they had. And then there's a very good summation of the case by a friend of mine called Brad Sparks. It's in Jerry Clark's UFO Encyclopedia. As far as I know, it's the only case in recorded history where not just radar, where I would bounce something off you and it comes back, but the object was sending out a signal of its own. So we're actually receiving, or they were receiving, some sort of signal from the object.
There's that communication aspect you mentioned before.
Yeah. Now that is a great case. Can you say for certain what happened in terms of an explanation? No. Everybody can have a theory. You can fit that case into almost every theory that you can come up with. The Air Force's explanation was that it was a civilian jetliner that was 700 miles away, that the air crew, the radar station, and everybody else mistook for a civilian jetliner. So I don't think that's a massive cover-up on the part of the military of an alien presence on Earth. What I think, it's the government saying, look, there's things in our sky or whatever that we can't explain. We're not wanting to admit that we don't know everything that's going on up there, because the government's number one job, above everything else besides taxing us, is to protect us. So the last thing a government wants to do is admit that in our airspace there's things going on that we don't understand,
can't control.
Yeah, that's scary on so many different levels, that if I'm the government, that's the thing I'd want to cover up. So you toss out all these crazy explanations, you dumb it down, you're perfectly happy with the crazy alien flying saucer stuff, because that just makes it even more disreputable. So people with tinfoil hats and stuff, more of them. I'm convinced a few of them are government agents, just to make the subject seem silly, because they don't want... It's not that they want to hide from us, again, the question and answer thing. They're not trying to hide the answers. They're trying to hide the questions. Mm-hmm. They don't want us asking those questions, because if we start asking the question, wait a second now, the government isn't all-knowing. It doesn't know everything. It can't control everything. Oh, well, there are implications in the real human world for that when we start looking at a government and saying, you actually don't know everything. And you've seen that in the last 10 years after 9/11.
That's right.
Where there's been a tremendous erosion of confidence in the government. And what have they done? They've just tightened up even more, tried to exert even more control, and it's not working. So that, anyway, the RB-47 case, the really crazy thing is, the reason I was interviewing Colonel Bailey, he wasn't involved in that case, but he was involved in his own case a few years later, flying a Common Cause mission over Cuba, basically the same narrative, shorter sighting, but visual sighting by the pilots. Unlike the 57 case that's in our film, he said we weren't receiving signals and stuff, they just blew our equipment out, like completely fried everything. But
that was October 62 in the Cuban Missile Crisis, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm not, off the top of my head, all these years later, I'm not exactly sure of the exact time, but it was around that time. And, Bailey, like, he's literally written the book on the history of the RB-47. I mean, literally, the book. You can go on Amazon and buy it. He's a highly decorated veteran. These guys who were in the 57 crew, highly decorated veterans. When people like that tell me interesting stories about a mystery, I take it seriously. And then the fun part begins when we say, we got a mystery, now let's talk about what it might be, or what it might, and maybe that's the ultimate communication, to get us thinking, to get us imagining different possibilities. Some of them are right, some of them might not be right, but it's all part of that. What does an artist try to do, Brent? Inspire people.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. We have to be able to entertain original new ideas. Otherwise, we're going to just stagnate as a culture, as a people, as a race completely. We've only got 3 minutes left. We're not going to be able to get the vampires. But you know what I'd like to do? There's a great Canadian sighting. We should finish off with this, and then I'd like to have you back to talk about the rest of your work, if you're willing to do that.
Sure.
Can we finish off with the sighting in the Yukon?
Sure. Northern started in the south of the Yukon, which is the north of everywhere else. Multiple witness sighting in three different locations. So you've got a group of witnesses here, and that's northern Yukon, a group of witnesses here. Love my maps. And
reminds me of Sheldon in Big Bang, when he's doing stuff and then he goes like that. Anyway, sorry, man.
We talked about that the other day. I've never actually watched an episode.
Oh, that's right. You haven't seen Big
Bang. I hear with Penny I should.
Absolutely,
So,
without question. I can say that.
I think one of them was a family, another was a group of loggers, maybe, or whatever. It was investigated by an engineer named Martin Jasek. They saw, Stan Friedman describes it as a large mothership-like object. That's how he describes it.
Aircraft
You listen to
carrier
the witnesses describe it, lights in the sky, large lights in the sky. Here, not the aurora borealis, not those kinds of natural explanations. Here, later here, later here. And anytime you have a single witness, if it's just you or me, I'd file those away and go, okay, who knows? If it's you and me in two separate places, but we know each other, well, okay, that's it, more interesting, but maybe we cook something up. But if it's you and me and 10 other people in 3 different locations and we don't know each other, this group doesn't know that group, doesn't know that group, and they all report seeing the same thing at slightly different intervals of time, well, now that's a pretty interesting case. And that's the Yukon case. I think it was number 9 in the film. And it's not known, it's really not known outside of Canada, but it should be.
Absolutely. Have you ever seen a UFO yourself?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, me neither.
I wish I would. If it is a form of communication, maybe they're trying to communicate with me through synchronicities. But no, I've never actually seen anything that I would call a UFO in the sense of that Yukon sighting or the RB-47 case. We all see lights in the sky. The satellites, all sorts of things are up there that I don't know what that is. But something that spectacular, no, haven't experienced it yet. And, I'd like to. It would be that would be an interesting part in the journey. So hopefully someday.
We got to start to wrap up now, folks. Again, I've been uncharacteristically quiet because that's fine. When you have a guest, a lot of inspiration comes from people I watched as a talk host, and Larry King comes to mind right away with a show like this I just did tonight. I just shut up and let the guest go because of the information. It's sometimes I have to work really hard to get information out of a guest, but when you have a knowledgeable fellow and a professional like we have tonight, you just let him go and try and guide it a little bit. So Charlie Rose comes to mind too. He's one of my favorites.
Charlie Rose is great. Yeah, I don't know how much information you got out of me, but you got a lot of verbiage. So Charlie Rose is great. He's amazing.
He sure is. Paul, you're going to have to come back. Paul Kimball, folks, a filmmaker out of Nova Scotia. He's got a lot more to say. There's a whole section we didn't get to when he's done a ghost series. Also, we didn't get to the part where we were going to talk about the uphill battle of being a Canadian artist and trying to get your work seen, heard, etc. And he's also just magnificent. He's done rock videos. He's done all kinds of stuff. www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on tonight's guest. I was going to say book cover ticket. Click on his picture. That'll take you right to his website where you can get all kinds of information off his website and watch all the videos we've been talking about for free. I'm Brent Holland. I'm Russian here. Thank you all for joining us tonight. See you next time. Thanks, Paul.
You're listening to Night Fright and your host, Brent Holland. The time is now. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio.